Hi everyone! Today we get to start writing some code. In the next 3 videos, we're going to go over some of the very core basics of JavaScript. My goal is to give you a very basic understanding of how to write a program from beginning to end. And after these videos, you're going to be able to write some very basic interactive JavaScript programs. Once we have the basics down, we'll go back and add a better understanding and build on our knowledge. And eventually, we will tie in our JavaScript knowledge with our learnings from the HTML and CSS series to create interactive websites. So I'm really excited to get started, so let's go ahead and dive right in. So over here on my left, I have Visual Studio Code open, and over here on my right, I have Git Bash Terminal open. So let's go ahead and get started. Over here on our left, we want to open folder. I already have a folder created for this video, so just go ahead and click on a folder or create a new one if you need to, and hit select folder. Once that's done, you'll see a new tab over here on the left, which once it's done loading, will let us right click, new file, and we can create a new file within that folder. So let's go ahead and call this variables.js and go ahead and hit enter. Whenever we make a JavaScript file, we want to always make sure we end it in .js. Just like a .txt is a text file or .jpeg is an image file, .js just signifies that it's a JavaScript file. Over here on our right, we also want to make sure that we are in the correct folder. You see right now we're in a different folder. So we can to get to a new folder, we use a command called cd, which stands for change directory. And we go to /f for me, /examples, and you can hit tab to autocomplete once you've typed some. And then for me, I'm just going to hit tab again since there's only one folder, one-variables, and go ahead and hit enter. And we can make sure that we're in the right folder by using a command called ls, which is basically list files in the current directory. Hit enter, and you'll see we have variables.js. So now we can go back over here and start making a JavaScript file. Now we're going to do just what we did in our setup file, or setup video, and do just a simple console.log hello world, ! And then we always want to end it with a semicolon. We'll go over what exactly we're doing and how it's working, why we want the semicolon, why we want the single quotes, all of that in a later video. But for now, just assume that this works. And let's go ahead and do Control S to save, and then we come over here. Now in the video where we set up all of our programs and got everything set up, we went directly into the Node interactive mode by just hitting Node, hit enter, and then we could type JavaScript commands directly here. Now though, we're going to hit Control C to get out of that, and we're going to run an actual file. So we type in Node like before, but instead of hitting enter, we say which file we want to run. So for us, it's variables.js. We hit enter, and you'll see that once we hit enter, it prints out hello world, just like we asked over here, and it ends and asks for a new command. So now if we want to come back over here and we say, for me, my name's Todd, we say hello Todd, save, come back over here. If we want to rerun the previous command, we just hit up on our keyboard. It'll print out the previous command, hit enter again, and now it says hello Todd. Now obviously this is a very simple example of a program. All it does is print one line out to the terminal. But it gives us a good starting ground of where we can start, and we can definitely start to build on it from here. So let's go ahead, just for kicks and giggles, let's add a few more console.logs just to see what happens. This is a test line, and console.log, this is another test. And if we save this and run it, we'll see that it basically runs in order. And you'll find that as we start writing code, code runs basically just like we read. It'll run left to right, top to bottom. So just like reading or writing in English, reading and writing code is pretty similar. Now JavaScript can output more than just text. We can also output numbers. So let's say we want to output 80, or the number, -47. If we save this and run it again, we'll see now that we have hello Todd, and then -47 and 80. You'll see that hello Todd is in white, whereas the -47 and 80 are in yellow. The reason for this is that hello Todd is considered what's called a string, or basically text. It's in quotes, whereas the -47 and 80 are considered numbers, and so they're in a different color. If we were to come back over here and turn our -47, put it in quotes, save, and run again, you'll see that now -47 is also white because it's no longer being treated as a number, but as a string or as text. This gets important later on once we start doing, math and other operations on our values. But for now, just know that white means string and yellow means numbers. We can also start doing more complex things with our console.log. So if we come down here, we can do console.log, let's say 80 minus 47, and close that, save. And if we run this, we'll see hello Todd, -47 as a string again, 80 is a number, and 80 minus 47 equals 33. So we see 33 listed as a number here. And so we can do more complex things. So whatever is within these parentheses is computed. There's nothing to compute here. It's just a string, a number. Here it's a mathematical equation. And so it computes what it is and then outputs it. So we can do more complex operations within the console.log. So now let's start talking about variables. A variable is basically a way to store data in a JavaScript program so that we can either work with it or retrieve it later. So we saw that we had 80 up here and 80 down here. We also had the -47. Let's turn this back into a number, and -47 down here. Well, what if this is something, these numbers are something that we're going to be wanting to use multiple times within our program? It doesn't really make sense to type out 80, 80, -47 all the way through our whole program. And especially if it's bigger chunks of data. What if it's a huge number or a very long piece of text? We don't want to have to type that out every time we're using it. So what we have are what's called variables. And there's two types of variables in JavaScript. There's a let, and then there's a const. There's also var, which you might have seen in other JavaScript tutorials or used in the past with JavaScript, but that's less used now, and instead we generally use let and const. And I'm going to go ahead and put 2 double slashes before, and that basically just turns this into a comment. When JavaScript sees 2 double slashes like this, it says, ignore whatever is at the end of this. I'm just going to ignore this line and don't do anything. Same with if we put it at the end of a line. If we do, it'll read and execute all the way up to the semicolon. It'll see these double slashes and say, okay, well, whatever is at the end of this, I don't really care about. Just keep going. So this is a way for programmers to write notes and keep track of what's going on in their code, explain something that may be a little bit confusing for a reader, or just help them remember what they were thinking about when they were writing the code originally. So let's go ahead and take that out. So there's 2 different types of variables. And so for now, let's go ahead and just start with a let. So we can say let, and then it's going to ask for a name. So let's go with my name. So let name, and so name equals Todd. So we're saying to JavaScript, okay, set a value called Todd and store it in a place called name. So now if we come down here and we say console.log name and take this out, notice how I don't have single quotes here. I'm saying console.log whatever the value of name is. And up here we said, I want name to equal Todd. So if we save this and run it, when we console.log, it's going to console.log Todd, because we said create a value and we're going to name it Todd, and then we're going to call it name, and the value of name is going to equal Todd. And then down here we're saying console.log whatever the value of name is. Name was Todd, so then it outputs here. We can also do the same with a const. Const value equals 80. And if we come down here and we say console.log value, save, and run it, we'll get 80. So we're saying, I want a variable named value, and I want value to equal 80. When we console.log, we're saying console.log whatever the value of value is, or whatever value equals 80, so it's going to console.log 80. So the main difference between a let and a const is that a let can change value over time. We're saying, for now, let's let name equal Todd, but later on, maybe name equals someone else. And if we come down here and we say console.log name, save it, if we run it, we'll now see that even though we set name equals Todd up here, we're changing name to now equal someone else. When we console.log name, it's saying whatever the current value of name is. When we first declared it, when we say let name equals, we're basically declaring that there is a variable called name and it equals Todd. But here we say name equals someone else. We console.log whatever the value of name is. Name got overwritten from Todd to someone else. So when we console.log, it equals someone else. The difference between a let and a const is that if I now say value equals 40, it's going to throw a fit because consts should never have their values changed. So let's change this back to console.log value. If I run this example, we're going to get a whole bunch of text, but it's basically saying assignment to constant variable. And that's what a const is it's a constant. Value should never change for as long as it exists. Value should equal 80, and it should never ever equal anything else. So that's basically the difference between a let and a const, is that a const will never change, whereas a let variable may or may not change at some point in the future. So those are the two different types of variables. You'll also note that once a variable has been declared, again, let name equals Todd, we are declaring that there will be a variable called, and we're making it equal Todd. Once it's been declared, we don't have to redeclare it again. So let's take out this so we don't get the error. But you'll notice that name equals someone else. We don't have to say let name equal someone else because we've already, once a variable has been declared, let name or const value, that's the declaration saying, hey, set aside a value called name or a placeholder called name, and we can put a value in it now, or we could put a value in it. Once it's there, we don't have to say, hey, set aside a placeholder called name again, because it's already been placed aside. So anytime we interact with a variable later on, we don't need to do that let. We just say, hey, it's already been declared, it's already been set aside. We don't have to do that. We just assume that it's been set aside and made. Another important thing is when you do a let, you can say let, let's say date. You don't have to give it a value right now. What we're saying is set aside a placeholder called date, and at some point we may put a value in it, at some point we might not. So down here we can say date equals today. And then if we come down here, console.log date, save it, and run it, we're going to get the output of today. Now what happens if we don't give date any value and try running? Well, here we go. We're going to get undefined. That's basically saying, okay, we've set aside a placeholder called date, but we haven't defined what date is. We don't know what date is. We've never told it what date is, so the answer is undefined, and that's why it's going to say undefined in a gray box. You know, it's different than the text undefined. It's saying, I literally don't know what it's supposed to be because you've never told me. So that happens quite often in programming. So it's a whole subject that we'll be talking about in the future. But we're basically saying set aside a placeholder called date. We may set it, we may not. So we can come down here and say date equals today, if I can spell, console.log date. And if we run this, what do you think will happen? Well, I expect that we're going to get two different lines. The first one is going to output what date is at this point, and since we haven't set anything, it's going to be undefined. Then we set date to today. We run it again, and then when it evaluates this, it says, okay, what's date now? Date is today. So now that we've saved, run it again, and yeah, we see undefined for the first one at line 10, console.log date. We haven't set anything, so it doesn't know what it's going to be, so it's undefined. Then we set it to today, and when we console.log it on line 14, we have it as today. Another thing that we can do, and the last thing that we're going to go over for today, is we can also say const A equals 80, const B equals negative 47, and we can say const C is equal to A plus B. And what do you think will happen when we output console.log C? I'm going to go ahead and remove these since we're done with it. Same with this since we're done with it. Save. So if we console.log C, let's see what happens. We're going to get the number 33. And so what we're saying is, I'm going to set aside a variable named A, and its value is going to equal 80. We're also going to set aside a variable called B. Its value is going to be negative 47. I'm going to set aside a variable called C, and it's going to equal whatever A equals, which is 80, plus B, which is negative 47, and we're going to store the result of this into the variable C. So when we output it, C is going to equal 33 because that's what that is. We can also do, A plus B, and so that'd be whatever 33 minus 47 is, which is negative 14. I cheated. That's okay. I don't mind. So you can do, complex stuff. And it's okay that we're referencing the variable twice. It's saying whatever the value of A is, which is 80, plus whatever the value of B is, which is negative 47, plus whatever the value of B is, again, which is negative 47, all of that, figure it out, and then store it into C. So we can do some combining of variables in some interesting ways to create new variables if we want to, and store them and use them later. So that's a brief overview of variables and how they work and how we can use them, and also a little bit more practice with outputting to a console, writing some actual code. So I would say go ahead and play around, set some variables, try changing them, try combining them, see what happens. See what happens if you add a string and a string together. See what happens if you add a string and a number, or an undefined and a number. See what happens. See if there's errors, see if there's results. Some of them may surprise you, some of them may not, but play around with them. See what happens. You're not going to break anything. So play around, experiment, and have fun with it. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. In our next video, we're going to be going over functions, which are basically a way to group sections of our code into reusable chunks. If you found this video helpful, make sure you subscribe to get notified when new videos are uploaded. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.